This episode is sponsored by World Anvil. World Anvil is an award-winning world-building and writing software for people who love to create rich and exciting worlds.
Dungeon Crawlers.
We would be honored if you would join us.
All right, everyone, welcome to another episode of Dungeon Crawlers, where we're here. And this is going to be a very interesting and different show than you've probably heard for a while. I mean, we have definitely had very controversial and debatable episodes, debating episodes, not debatable, debating episodes. And this is going to be one of them. However, it's not going to be a topic like, which is better, Star Wars or Star Trek, or even which is better, pink or blue, or, which do you like, Powerade or Gatorade? This is going to be talking about which is, we've got several topics, but we're going to start out with the topic of what is better, binge watching an entire series or watching a series episodically, like it used to be when we were younger, and it would come out one episode a week at a time. And if you missed it, you were tough out of luck. Now, we may not go that far because, DVR and stuff like that, but the difference between those two. So who was it that wanted to run this one?
I want to run with this one. This one's been on my mind lately. So I have been utterly enjoying, for those of you who heard our Willow review episode last week, if you haven't, go check it out. For those of you who heard that episode, I will tell you that the way that I feel about Willow is diametrically opposite to how I feel about HBO's The Last of Us. I'm an enormous fan of the video game series, and when they were bringing this out, I definitely had some cautious concerns, but I can tell you categorically that what they are doing is monumentally fantastic, and the reviews reflect that as well. But I bring this up because...
Crabs, hyperbole much?
I know, right? I will tell you that I've tried getting some of my friends to watch this, and I've heard something that I have heard many a time before, which is I am waiting for the episodes to drop so I can binge it. And I've been giving this some real thought lately. I recently saw the film Skinamarink, and I'm watching The Last of Us, and I also reflect on a more recent but now completed series, Mr. Robot, that I also watched. And, growing up in our youth, the three of us, we would watch shows like you described, Daniel, where it had a time slot on a specific day of the week, and you had to watch it at that time, or you had to set up your VCR, or you had to set up your DVR, or you missed that episode. And if you missed that episode, then you went through the rigmarole of talking to your friends, of trying to get a hold of it. And so I wanted to discuss tonight the pros and the cons, or the preferences behind binging a series or a season, let's just say a season, in its totality versus an episodic drop.
So this is something I've noticed for me, and this is something that it was kind of fascinating when I just realized this. When I am watching a show one episode at a time. So I just was recently watching the new National Treasure TV series on Disney Plus. And I noticed that I was also watching a lot of other episodes just one at a time. And I realized when I did it that way, I had more time in my day to do other things. Because when you get in that binge cycle, next thing you know, the day's over. And then you got to go to bed. And then you go back to work, but then you want to watch the rest of it. And so I found when I was binging that I was missing out on so many things. And I think, that's why it was so great when I was a kid is, I knew when my shows were, and I could plan my day around that. I knew from a certain time, there was that window that I would watch my shows, and then I'd be outside playing. I'd be outside goofing off with friends and going and doing things. Now with the way it is, like my kids, they'll be binging stuff on Netflix. It's like, hey, go outside. No, don't want to right now. I'm watching this show. And next thing it's like, hey, can I go outside? It's dark outside. Mm-hmm. No, you've wasted the whole day. And so I really think as great as it is that we can get everything at once, I think we get in this mindset where I got to watch the next one. I got to watch the next one. I got to watch the next one. And then next thing we know, we've ran out of time. The weekend's gone or the evening's gone and we can't do anything. And there's nothing to be excited for because now you've been to watch the whole season, like Stranger Things. We're not getting another season till next year. It's 2023. We just got the last, season last
End
year.
of 2022.
Yeah. We got to wait over a year and a half where, yeah, granted, even if I watched it one episode a week, it still wouldn't have stretched out far enough. But, that could have been prolonged a little bit more. And so I feel like we lose something. Plus, there isn't that really cool thing, at my previous job, there's a couple of us that would get together and we talk about the last episode we watched. There was kind of that cool water cooler factor where we talked about it. We made, we kind of made assumptions of what would happen in the next episode. And then there'd be the episodes that they binge and it's like, have you watched it yet? I'm like, no. Oh, well, we can't talk about it. So you lose out on that because like, oh, I don't want to spoil it for you. And so it's this weird dynamic now.
So you're saying that like one of the cons is lost time.
Yep.
There's also you have this large stretch between when you'll get another episode if you binge everything at once because now there's a large gap before the next thing drops.
Yeah.
And also a lack of synchronicity in the water cooler effect, as you put it.
Yes.
I think those are all excellent points. Matthew, what are your thoughts?
In the age of instant gratification, one of the pleasures that we're missing out on is the joy of anticipation. Mm-hmm. And you've got when you can just watch every single thing and just get it all out all at once. You spent, an 8 episode season, you get up in the morning, you watch it all the way until the evening, your day is gone, like Daniel says, but you've watched everything. You've got to experience it. You haven't forgotten anything from episode to episode, but you get the entire roller coaster of emotions. You see how every plot twist ends. There's no such thing as a cliffhanger when you can just go on to the next episode. And you got to experience the whole thing in its entirety. And there's some appeal to that. However, it's done. You had this huge endorphin rush, and now it's over. By the time that IP comes up again for another season, or if it does, you likely will have forgotten a lot because you took it all in at once. Spacing things out a little bit, anticipating gives your mind a chance to let your imagination kind of exercise itself. Because like, what's going to happen with my favorite character? How could they possibly resolve this? Who done it? Who's the bad guy in this mystery, right? Mm-hmm. And you're thinking about these things until the next episode comes. I can't wait to see how this turns out. It's that joy of anticipation. And it's one of the reasons that I would never make a good book reviewer is that when I get a book, I intentionally read it slowly. I intentionally will say, I've read enough. I'm putting it down now because I want to make the joy last. Mm-hmm. I want to have it stretch out. And I think that's, and when I say the joy of anticipation, I think there's a lot of people out there, especially the ones that are fans of binging, that are going to go like, man, he's so stupid. Is like, you don't get it. Well, don't knock it till you try it. There's something to be said. And I'll always remember this lesson I learned as a very young adult. I was working construction in a summer that hit 116 degrees. And I had one of those huge thermoses. I think it was held about a gallon or maybe 2 gallons. And my buddy's wife had got one of those thermoses and made Kool-Aid with ice. And it would stay cold most of the day. And yeah, water was really good, but when you were thirsty, man, a hit of that Kool-Aid, that really hit the spot. And so we get there and it's his, and we're both just sweating and we're thirsty. And I say, here, you go first. It's yours. He goes, oh, no, man. It'll taste better 5 seconds from now when you're done. So he let me take the first sip, and he took it. And I always remembered that because it tastes sweeter for the anticipation. It tastes sweeter for the longing for it, or for waiting a little bit longer. Daniel?
Well, I was just going to say, books are a little different. Books are kind of designed to keep running, pulling you into the story. It's that, the more you get invested and the deeper into the story they draw you in. Which is, again, like watching an episode. I mean, really, that's kind of what it's like. But you're right, it's that anticipation, it's that excitement. Even if we're wrong in our assumptions of what's going to happen in the next episode, we're excited about it. That's why social media is always a buzz of what's the latest thing we saw on set for the latest Marvel movie, or the latest Star Wars movie, or the latest Indiana Jones movie, or so on and so forth. Because of the anticipation, we want to see those little tidbits. We want to know what's going to be there, because we don't get movie after movie after movie. You can't binge watch, all the Marvel movies until they're all out, and that's
Is that a challenge?
It's not possible. It's not possible. Because they don't make them that way. It's not like they make them and then they just throw them all out there at once and okay, just watch them. They can't. And so it's that anticipation that we're excited about because we want to know what happens next. The whole first section of it's what's called the Infinity Stone saga. Everyone was eagerly anticipating what was next because we see that little clip at the end of of the credits. And it's like, oh my gosh, that guy's showing up. Now what? Now what's going on? And then we'd have to wait till the next movie, and then you'd see the next movie, and then there'd be another clip. I mean, it was a brilliant marketing plan the way they did that because it kept you interested, waiting till the next one. You can't really, you can't do that really. You have the cliffhanger at the end of the season, and then you're left. And I get it. There's sometimes you're in that zone where you watched one episode, you want to watch the next one. But you get into that cycle too much, you're at the end, and then there's nothing. You're left wanting.
Interestingly, your movie comment when Return of the King came out, a local movie theater did a marathon where they had Fellowship of the Rings, the Two Towers, and then they were going to debut the Return of the King. And you paid an ungodly amount of money, and you got a commemorative cup and a popcorn bucket that you could get refills on as much as you wanted to get through the day. And you had to eat their hot dogs and pretzels for lunch. But I was there all day long. I ate way too much. It hit a certain point where I was just like, I don't want any more popcorn. I'm fine. But I did. I stayed there all day and did that. Now, another theater for Marvel did, leading up to, I think it was Endgame, they went back several movies, and I think they did like a 24 or 36
I thought it was a 15 movie.
Yeah,
it was 15 movies.
I think it was a 36-hour marathon culminating in Endgame that they were going to go through and do all this. And a local movie critic went and did it as part of his job. And his most memorable, because you end up falling asleep in the middle of some of this, right? His most memorable thing is you've got a room full of nerds, and it didn't take very many movies until the theater smelled like it. He will never get the smell out of his memory. A whole bunch of people eating popcorn and not showering for 36 hours. That was his most. That was his biggest impression.
That's hilarious. The reason why this topic was kind of nagging at me is because, and I brought up these examples earlier, and now I'll explain why. I went and saw Skin and Marink with my friend Chris, with my buddy Chris. And it's one of those films. It's a film. It's not a series, but it's one of those films that sits with you, and you have to really consider it. It's not a one and done popcorn fun kind of movie. Like you could grab any Fast and Furious, you could watch it start to finish, and you don't really have to think deeper than we got family and like enjoying cars, right? Like
The less deeply you think, the more you'll enjoy it.
That's actually true. That's actually true. There's not much to cogitate upon. And we've talked about Kroll incessantly on the show, thanks to me. No,
Which does deserve many deep thoughts.
which we enjoyed as kids on the surface, but then as we became adults, we started thinking about it deeper and deeper, and then we found more value, right? And with Skinamarink, this is sort of like I'm drawing a gamut here, right? Fast and the Furious, Kroll is in the middle, and then at the very polar opposite end of Fast and Furious is Skinamarink, where you leave the theater and the enjoyment of what you just experienced does not come until you've really thought about it and you've started to understand the meaning or the insinuation or the feelings and the thoughts. It's really it's a cognitive exercise, and if you don't do that, then the movie has no value. But when you do that, it has exceptional, indescribable value. And I have found that there are certain qualities of shows that are very much like this. Mr. Robot, for example, there is an episode in the very first season that has an extremely poignant end. And when that sits with you for a week, which is how I watched it, it resonates and it bothers you. It's supposed to bother you. It chews at you. You really like sit with it, and it has an emotional impact as it sets, as it simmers inside of you, right? I showed that episode to a friend of mine. I was showing him the show for the very first time, and we were watching it every day at lunch at work. So we were watching these things kind of back to back. We got to that episode, and I noted that even though he and I share very similar opinions on shows like this, it hit him with significantly less impact than it hit me, because the next day we just got on with the story and it filled in with other things. There wasn't that room for the emotions to sit and simmer. And so I've been curious of late if binging, when we get a show, when we have a streaming service that gives us all 8 or 10 or 12 or 4 or 6 or however many episodes of a show, if it gives us all the episodes at once, are we actually doing ourselves a disservice by feeding into that immediate gratification? Are we doing the show a disservice, the creators a disservice, by not sitting with the material? When they release it episodically, week by week, are they doing us a favor? I did not used to think that, but I think recently, within the last few weeks, I've really changed my mind on this.
So another thought I had about the binging topic is that, like most things, the path of wisdom lies somewhere in the middle.
Yeah.
I think like Daniel absolutely is right. Get up and do something with your life. As William Shatner famously said, move out of your parents' basement. You do have to be a productive, responsible adult. But once you've worked, you've earned your playtime. That's my philosophy.
Yes.
So, taking some time to enjoy your show. And if you want to watch, the good thing about having them all released at once is that you can watch it on your schedule. I can watch 2 or 3 episodes tonight. It may be a few days, and then I can get back, and maybe I'll only have time for one, but then I'll get back to it later on and be able to watch several more in a row. So having the option of saying, you know what, I still got time, I want to see how this resolves, and going on to do the other one. So a kind of a hybrid between the two, watching a few, but perhaps not all at a time, I think gives you the best of both worlds. Having said that, I want to pose a couple questions to you.
Yeah.
You and I are both, Krebs and I are both big fans of 24.
Yes.
And 24's big gimmick was this is real time. An hour of the show is supposed to be an hour of what happens in the story.
Including commercial breaks.
Yes. That's when all the characters actually got something to eat or went to the bathroom, was during the commercial breaks. So in a show like that, that's more real time and supposed to happen really, really quick, how does that format of a show change, if at all, your opinion on the virtues of binging, watching several of them in a row, or having to wait for a week in between each hour of what happens in the story?
I think accidentally, by giving the gamut of Fast and the Furious to Skinamarink, I accidentally pointed out a way to judge the rate at which you can watch a show. If you have a show that does not require, or I'm sorry, that does not benefit, let's not say require, let's say benefit. If you have a show that does not benefit from cogitation, and I would put 24 maybe a little bit toward the middle compared to Fast and the Furious, but 24 is a show that is excellent when you watch it 2, 3, 4 episodes in a row. You know, or if you want to be a diehard, you know, you could spend
watching 24 episops in a row.
You could watch it 24 episodes in a row, and then you know, take a break, maybe shower, maybe eat. But yeah, maybe that range. I propose this: that gamut of Fast and the Furious to Skinamarink, which measures the benefit you gain by simmering in the content in between doses. I think that expresses how you discover which shows you can binge versus which shows you shouldn't binge.
That's a good point. Second point I want to bring up, and I think that what they did with Stranger Things was pretty wise from a strategy standpoint. This last season, they released most of the episodes, and then they stopped. And you have to, I think you had to wait for like a month, I think. And what they did is they got Act 1 and Act 2, but the resolution of everything that happens in Act 3, they waited. And they knew, I think that this was some pretty smart marketing, because there's going to be some group that watches it a bit at a time, but it's going to be slower than another group. And they didn't want all the social media buzz to reveal what was going to happen. Too early, right? They had a stopping point where everybody had a chance to catch up, and then they released the last few, which people would consume relatively quickly. And I think they also did that specifically for my point of the anticipation. By they're creating demand the same way the Girl Scouts do by only selling their cookies once a year. When it comes around, the demand is incredible. And I think that's kind of what they did with Stranger Things. So in a sense, the show creators of Stranger Things, at least, if not other properties, are realizing there definitely is a dichotomy between binging and watching episodically. What do you think of how Stranger Things released their episodes?
It's still so. For me, it didn't make a difference because I enjoy Stranger Things, but I wait forever before I watch it. Like, it had been out for quite a while before I even started watching it, and it was because I didn't want to jump on the bandwagon. And so when the new season came out, I felt the same way. Like, I don't want to jump on the bandwagon of this just to watch it forever, you know, because everyone's watching it. It is a great series. It's really well written. It's beautifully done, and they hit all the right cylinders. They had a big reveal that was happening, and they wanted to drag that out. So what they did by releasing those 2 massively long episodes, holy crap, they were like movies in their own right because of how long they were. They should have been pushed out as, you know, the last one should have been 4 episodes, honestly, because it was almost 2 hours. But it was done beautifully because they didn't want the reveal to come out early. Like you said, the story built up, and it's like, we're pausing, and we're going to wait. And then, because that anticipation, everyone wants to know who Vecna is. Like, there's hints. Who is he? And then we stop. There's nothing left, and it's because they called back on that old sensation, that old feeling we had with those episodic episodes, and they came out one at a time each week.
Yeah, I like, actually, now that you describe it that way, I was kind of in a similar boat, Daniel, where I did not intentionally delay watching the show. It was just a matter of life events. And so when I did watch the show, I didn't have to wait long between where they broke the season up and where they added the last episode. I watched it on my schedule the way I would have even if they had dropped all the episodes. But what I do like about what they did was that they hamstrung social media trolls, or even just people who are trying to be excited about something they love and they want to share it on social media.
Yeah.
And what that inevitably does is it creates spoilers for people who haven't been able to get there yet. And I don't know about you, but like I'm really glad I saw The Matrix in 1999 because now I know how to dodge bullets like Neo when it comes to spoilers, right? Like every time something new comes out, and I haven't seen it yet, I'm like, Trinity, help! And I like go into a backbend trying not to see things on social media.
Which is really funny because we're on social media and we actually have spoiler episodes.
Yeah, we do. Yeah, but we label them clearly.
Oh yeah.
But the ones that I hate are the things that are like an image of a key moment, a still frame that gives away everything, and then like you can't unsee it. Once you see it, you've seen it.
Yeah, and it just shows up in your social media feed as your
it's like scrolling chicken recipes, video game news, spoiler I didn't want to see. Like that sort of thing. So yeah, I on the one hand, there are shows I love to binge. Like no joke, the Amazing World of Bubblegum. Or Amazing Adventures of Bubblegum, or Gumball, excuse me. The Amazing World of Gumball. The Amazing World of Gumball is one of the best animated shows to come out in the last 20 years. I highly recommend it, but the episodes are 15 minutes each, and they are released in duets. They're released 2 episodes at a time, back to back, in the same. So you end up with 2 full-length episodes for the price of 1, if you will. Even slightly less so, but still binge worthy, is Adventure Time. Adventure Time is one of the, you really should grab your friends because we're going to very distant lands. It's one of the best, most wonderful, amazing animated shows ever created, and I loved watching those 2, 3, 4 episodes at a time after it, kind of exploded in popularity. So I think where we've landed is that binging can work for certain shows, but honestly, we encourage the audience to take time to sit with and with their, with more intellectual material, and also to take a moment to live life at the same time and spread out your joy a little bit. You'll actually find more value in many shows and movies if you do that.
Yeah, I agree.
Not to change the subject, and I really don't mean to brag, but I just wanted to let you guys all know I've got the heart of a lion and a lifetime ban from the zoo.
Matthew, now I want to know what you did with Scarecrow's brain.
Something else I thought was really weird, really surprised me the other day, was when the stationery store moved.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. Because
that's the joke. That's the joke. Yeah.
Stationery store.
I'm not going to lie. I was waiting for the punchline, and then I realized the setup was the punchline. That's what's called a one-liner, kids.
Man, all I can say, you really need some staples in that one.
Daniel.
Now it's time to chat about our sponsor, World Anvil. World Anvil is an award-winning world-building and writing software for people who love to create rich and exciting worlds. With their software, you can create your world, manage your campaign, plan your novel, create a world wiki, wow your players, make novels more interactive, and make your worlds come to life. You can find them at worldanvil.com, and if you put in the discount code DCR40, you will receive a 40% discount today.
You know what's funny is when Daniel said when Daniel said all I can say is, if you had stopped right there, that was perfect.
I know. So what's the next one? So we've talked about this. I think we've given some solid feelings and input regarding binging versus episodic. Where should we go next? What is the next one?
Well, how about ebooks versus physical books.
Ooh.
Now, they have really exploded in popularity. Number of readers out there. One of the most popular, of course, is Kindle. And, of course, Amazon owns the marketplace for that. And there's been a lot of debate over... There's a lot of elements to this. That's what I guess I'm trying to say. Why ebooks are priced the way they are. You got the hardbacks, you got paperbacks, and you've got mass market media format of these books to come out in. Some people, what is it that makes one format superior to the other, and how different are the reading experiences? Before I give my thoughts on that, what do you think about this? Let's start with you, Daniel.
One day, our listeners will see the video of this, and they can see in my background. Or maybe one day they'll help me move.
My back still hurts.
Yes.
Another box of books, Daniel?
I have so many boxes of books. So I like holding a book. I love smelling the scent of pages as I'm flipping through and reading that book. There is something about holding a book and flipping through the pages and devouring the words upon that page that has always just drawn me in. Now, last June, I got a Kindle white paper. Krebs suggested it. It looked really cool. I have 250 books loaded on there of mine, and I have not read from it once. In fact, I don't even know where it is. It went on a trip with me for over the Christmas holiday, and I haven't seen it since. So I should probably find that. But
someone was just gifted a Kindle white paper with 250
probably.
books.
I mean, that just tells you, like, I don't care about it, but my books I do, and there's more to it than that. Like, I am probably the craziest, insane person on the planet when it comes to books. I don't break the spine on my paperbacks.
I'm proud of you.
Most people think I'm crazy the way I'm holding it. I have 6 books out of the hundreds of books I own that the spine is broken and there are cracks. It just tells you how many times I've read those books, and they're definitely worn. Now, the problem is I can't buy new ones of those because those are out of print. There's still something about turning those pages. And not only that, there are some books that I own that I've read, and I'll mark it. For example, some of my books from Bob Salvatore, at the beginning of most of the sections of those books, the main character, Dritz de Orden, has this kind of inner monologue with himself. And I can't tell you the number of times that I have read one of those monologues and it's hit me. It has been pivotal to that moment in my life. And I will stop, I will highlight it, and I will write a note there. And so you can't do that in an ebook. And the biggest selling point, I think, with an ebook, you can't have it signed by the author.
That is a great one. For me, I'm a mixed bag on this one. And not to sound too, one note with what we just talked about a moment ago, but this may yet again be one of those situations where it's like circumstance dictates preference. When ebooks were first becoming a thing, and when I say that, I mean, I'm talking like when ebooks were first really becoming well known, I don't know, 2008, that sort of thing. There was it was weird because ebooks would at that time would cost as much or sometimes more than the physical copy of the book, which always astounded me. I was like, why? You don't have to pay for distribution. You don't have to pay for the printing costs. You make a file and then you distribute that electronically. This shouldn't cost the same as a physical book. And eventually, and it took longer than I had wished, but eventually, the cost of ebooks came way down way down compared to their physical counterparts. I love a good physical book, and I am a sucker for having beautiful books on my bookshelves. I'm getting the Wheel of Time series one book at a time, and I'm making sure that all the covers, all the jackets match, and I want them all hardcover. Like, that's very preferential. I got a book that was written by a former U.S. president and got it signed by that former U.S. president, and that was important to me to get in hardback, to Daniel's point about autographs. But lately, I've also been working on trying to read faster. I'm a painfully slow reader, and I don't like that I read slow. I want to be able to read fast and retain, right, to comprehend. And I got a Kindle from my previous job as part of like our standard kit, and I started using it just to, at first it was to read books for work. And then I discovered that because of the way that I could adjust the font size, because of the sort of like tactile experience of quote unquote turning a page, but doing so rapidly made me feel better about how I was reading. And it also made it, to Daniel's point, possible for me to carry myriad books at once for the very same physical exertion, no matter how many books I was carrying, right? Like, I'm carrying a Kindle in my pocket, and I now have 80 books with me. While I prefer physical books, especially when we're talking about special editions or special sentimental editions of books, when it comes to books that maybe are not so sentimental, or when I'm working on my reading speed, actually, digital has become, I think, my preferred format.
You know, you have a good point. When it comes to traveling, it's a lot easier to take the Kindle than a book. You know, when I used to go on business trips, you know, I take 2 or 3 books, and that takes up a lot of space. The Kindle definitely would have been a lot easier. It's smaller. It wouldn't have taken up as much space, which means I would have had more space for clothing or souvenirs or whatever. So there is definitely that bonus side, that plus side to it. You know, and you're right. When they first came out, the price for those was the same price as a physical book, which is really, I have that same frustration and argument with digital movies. Why is the digital movie the same price as me going out and picking up the actual physical copy? It's not costing you as much. So quite often I'll wait till they go on sale and they're dirt cheap. But that is what is really interesting about, you know, kind of this topic is convenience. I think ultimately this one boils down to convenience.
Yeah.
You know, is it more convenient? Yes. Anyone that moves me from now on would probably say, load up your Kindle and get rid of all. But, you know, on a wet, rainy day, I love holding a book in my hand. When I'm sitting out on my hammock, I don't, you know, I want a book in my hand. When I'm sitting on an airplane, you know, maybe the Kindle would be the better option because it's not going to take up as much space. And, you know, there is the swiping, kind of feels almost like turning the page, but not quite. But it does definitely give me more room to travel.
And I want to hear what Matthew has to say about this. I realize I haven't given him time to speak yet, but what you said about movies reminded me of one more thing that actually makes a fantastic argument for the alternate of what I just said a moment ago. I still love physical books, and I still prefer physical movies because no one can take them away from me on a whim. Whereas with digital media, whether it's from a streaming service or even when I mean, Sony just went through this with PlayStation. I'm a huge PlayStation fan, but this was something that really kind of upset a lot of people, and I understand why. Sony went through this where they lost the licensing or they got rid of the service that provided certain digital content from their streaming platform, which was never as popular as, like, say, Netflix or Hulu or Amazon or anything like that. And so even though people had paid money to have these digital rights, they were no longer being served up. And because they were no longer being served up, they lost their stuff, right? Spotify does this sometimes with some of their songs. They make different licensing agreements. Their licensing agreement for something they had expires, and then there's a song that comes to my mind every once in a while that I can only remember bits of, but I know it's out there, and I can't remember enough of it to know how to find it again. But Spotify got rid of it, and now I don't have that song anymore that I can listen to, and I can't find it anywhere because I don't have enough information. So physical stuff, my box of CDs, of audio CDs that's in my shed, I won't get rid of that because it can't be taken away from me. And the same thing is true of physical books. Heaven forbid should the EMP ever happen, and even digital media, or the ways to watch digital media and enjoy it goes the way of the earth. Physical books will still be there. Short of a fire or a flood, they will still be there.
Josh, the song title you're looking for is Mambo Number 5.
No, it has never been Mambo Number 5. It was the Macarena. Thank you very much.
That would have been my second guess.
You're right. And that's the other thing that really does frustrate me about electronic media. Same thing has happened even with Audible. So the Audible accounts, if you're a member, you get free books.
Yeah, every month you get like so many credits.
Yeah. Well, besides the credit, there's also like for members, there's just books that are free that you can add to the library. Well, now those some of those have an expiration date, and then they're gone, and then you have to buy them if you want them back again, which is frustrating. Transformers the animated movie. I had that. I bought a physical copy that had a code that allowed me to get the digital version. Then they released the 40th anniversary or whatever 30th anniversary or whatever it was, and then I didn't have my digital anymore because they put out a new version, and it's like I gotta buy it again even though I bought it and I had the code for it. Like, what the heck? So the way they do movies, I definitely don't like. Digital books isn't quite the same. They haven't got to that point yet, but I wouldn't be surprised.
But they could. Yeah,
they really easily could. But the even more difficult part of that is, okay, let's say what happens, kind of like what happened with your Facebook account, where it gets hacked and you can't get back into your account. Now you can't get any of those books you purchased, because you had to set up a new account, and there's no way to get back to that account because all those books are tied to that Amazon account.
Yep, that's correct.
Then what do you do?
And Kindle users should be aware that there is a mechanism built into the software that allows Amazon to reach into your device and remove any titles that it wants to. By the end user license agreement, they will only do that in situations where they lose the licensing or they've been ordered by the court.
Where it's a legal issue. Yeah.
Yes. So even though the same situation exists there that you've described, if something happens on the vendor side, it doesn't matter that you paid your real money for it. They can take it out of your digital hands, so to speak. My thoughts on this, I'm actually kind of like the binge issue. I am in the middle. At any given time, as I've gotten older, I get to the point where reading one book at a time is not enough. I'm always reading at least 2 books at the same time, and usually 3 or 4. And hopefully they're not related, because I tried reading Robert Jordan and George R.R. Martin at the same time, and I just got them mixed up. It was so frustrating. So there need to be some differences between them. So I'll often have a book, and I've got to have a bookmark to keep my place. But I do like having that feeling in my hand. But then I also have my Kindle reader, and I can get books from the library instantly without having to get in my car and actually drive down to the building and check out a book. I can just go online, find the title, and load and download it. I love that libraries are doing ebook checkouts now too, and I think it's ridiculous that there's a limit on how many they can check out at once.
Right.
But there's reasons, I know. So I like both. I like having the option of both. When I go, my family will often spend a week on the lake once or twice a year. And in those situations, I do not want to bring my electronic devices. In fact, I often take that as an opportunity to unplug, disconnect, and go analog. Also, I don't think that electronic devices and large bodies of water go well together. So if I drop my paperback in the water and rescue it fast enough, it's still readable, but I'm probably going to throw it away and buy a new one. But, even if it's a $20 book, which they rarely are, that's a lot less expensive than a new device that has all of my books and everything else on it too. So depending on the kind of travel I'm going to, if the environment is somewhat hostile, I'll take a physical book every time. I don't want to risk my precious electronics. But also, I am a sucker for bookstores. Used to be, especially in my younger days, we'd go to the mall and everybody would go to the popular spots. I could not walk past B. Dalton without having to go inside and look at the shelves. And they were like, "You were just in here yesterday. We haven't put anything new out." It's okay. I'm just visiting my friends. The friends meaning the books. I didn't really have many people that were my friends. So I.
By your dad jokes, it doesn't surprise me.
Hey, I wasn't a dad yet. I wasn't this funny. I just loved looking at the books and seeing what the authors have put out, enjoying the covers and judging books by them. In fact, just the other day, I had a bit of that book fever hit me as I was at the mall with my kids doing, just some shopping, letting them shop basically. But there's been a bookstore that's moved in, and it's not necessarily new, but it was the first time that I'd seen it. That is a used bookstore in the mall. Mm-hmm. And I just devoured it, went through, and they had all kinds of out of print books and older science fiction books. And I found something from my childhood that was very special to me for $1.50. So immediately I grabbed it. Yes. And there was a bunch of other books there that I would have grabbed had I more time, that I could spend hours just browsing a good bookstore. The loss of the King's English in downtown Salt Lake City is a real cultural loss. I
agree with that.
And you know what? So I do like the physical stuff. Digital is convenient. I won't begrudge either one.
There is something magical about a physical bookstore that you, especially ones that carry, say, hard to finds or specialty items in addition to the common items that you might find. Even when I go to the airport, I can't help but look at the books section to see if there's something interesting. Again, judging the book by its cover. But there's something magical about it. In fact, the Printed Garden, which is a bookstore that we've mentioned on the show before and has been an excellent supporter of both DCR and Daniel as a published author, the Printed Garden started doing blind date with a book, where they would wrap a book in basically a brown paper bag cover, so you couldn't see the cover, and then they taped a blurb onto that bag. The title is not given, the author is not given, it is just a blurb, and the idea is if the blurb interests you, have a blind date with this book. And I thought it was just utterly brilliant, and there is something magical and special about a physical book. And maybe this goes back. I'm gonna talk about this later in the show, I think toward the end. But I am reminded of the movie Neverending Story, where
I was gonna bring that up.
Where Sebastian goes into a hole-in-the-wall bookstore and there's a special book. And I realize that's completely a fantasy story, but that experience that they put on screen is only believable because at the time that we saw that was how you got books. You went to a bookstore. And even in today's society, even in a modern scenario, there's no way that you could have the Neverending Story experience if it weren't for having that physical book. And I will debate people on that if they want. Daniel.
So you brought up a really good point, and this kind of contributes to why physical books are better. When you go into a bookstore, even if you're wandering aimlessly, you go like, I'm looking for a book. What do you recommend? And you have people like, oh, yeah, here's a good book. Here's some ideas. Or like, what are you into? Are you into science fiction, fantasy, horror, thriller, suspense, whatever? And you let them know, and they direct you to, well, here's some good books. Here's something you might be interested in. You have someone there to suggest. When it's ebooks, you don't get that. It's just, you got to hope that they have a really good blurb on there, or someone told you about it. Because otherwise, you're just scanning. Like, you don't know. The one thing I do like about Audible with the audiobooks is you can at least hear a sample. So you can kind of see, oh, do I like this or not? And on Amazon, on some of them, it does have a sample where you can read a few pages.
Mm-hmm.
But even then, that's kind of awkward and weird. Because if you're looking on your phone or on a laptop or something, it just depends on what device you're using to see if you read it well enough. But even then, you're just kind of rummaging through it really quickly. So that's just something, again, I feel like physical books have over ebooks.
So going back to Neverending Story, one of the problems Sebastian has is he's late for school, and so he goes and he hides in the attic and then starts reading.
Because he's binging and he's experiencing lost time and he's not living life.
Exactly. He gets so caught up in the story, he loses track of time, and he he takes a break for lunch, but he won't leave his book, and then he goes back to his book, and then it's after school, and the school's kind of locked up, and then it's night, and his dad's not even looking for him. We don't know that, but he the thing is, I've experienced that. Maybe you have too, where you get into a book and you get so into it that you start losing time.
Yeah.
Do you feel that there's a difference in that experience? Do you have that experience as often with a digital book as much as you might with a physical book, or is there no difference?
I don't.
Oh, go ahead, Daniel. I'm sorry.
Go ahead. You go ahead. I went last time.
You know what? I recently came across a book that I don't think I normally would have read, but the blurb caught me. And I ended up binging that book really hard, and I read the whole thing on my Kindle. And what I found was I could read it, not just in my house, but on the go. It was very easy to take with me places. It was discreet in the sense of, like, if I pull it out of my pocket, it's not that much different than someone pulling a phone out of their pocket. And oh, by the way, this episode not endorsed by Kindle. The fact that I was using a Kindle meant that I also had Whisper Sync to my phone, so if I couldn't take my device with me, I had my phone with me, and then I also did this combo thing where I would play Spotify on my phone, but I would pick a soundscape type soundtrack that fit the genre of the book, and it ended up making this incredibly deeper emotional experience as I read, and I just binged this thing, and I read it again. I'm a slow reader, especially compared to Daniel, who can read like a book a day, maybe 2 books a day. But I read this thing lickety splitsville for me, because I had the convenience of the Kindle. Now, if I'd had it in paperback, would it have been any less convenient? Probably not. But it also meant that I could read this at night while my wife was sleeping, while the lights were off, because my Kindle is backlit. So I could read this anytime, day or night, without disturbing my wife. This meant that I could read this thing anytime I had 2 minutes to myself. So yeah, I binged on a Kindle.
So for me, and again, I think this really depends on the person. For me, I can't. And it's kind of the exact opposite of a phone. Like, there's this weird thing when you're on the phone and social media, you just you're drug in.
You doom scroll.
You're scrolling, and you just, next thing you know, wow, it's been an hour. For me, when I'm on those devices, I feel like I'm constantly distracted. I'm trying to read, but my brain is taking in everything else around me, and it's just not investing me into the story. So I'll read, and it'll be okay, and then I put it down. But when I'm with a book, and I'm reading, the words on the page, I'm just drawn in, and I'm focused, and I'm zooming, and I'm just to the next page, reading the story to the next page. Much like what happened to Bastion, except for I'm not getting stoned or getting chased by a super fast snail, or sobbing like well, everyone's gonna sob when that horse dies. So
yeah, everyone lost Artex. Okay,
yes,
everyone did.
But that is, but whether you're getting drawn in on the Kindle device, whether you're getting drawn in on the physical book, that's the amazing thing about books. It draws you in. You're invested in as long as it's well written, you're invested in the characters, you're invested in the story. But I feel like the light coming off the device, at least for me, is what really disengages me. and my body is like, nope, I can't do this. So
Interesting.
yeah,
I don't blame you, but I find that interesting.
yeah.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, I was just kind of curious about that. So, what conclusions have we made here? That there's definite advantages to each format. That, like most things, it depends on the situation.
Yeah.
Which is going to be most convenient and which best fits you. If it's a wet, rainy day, like Daniel says, curling up with a good physical book, experiencing and hearing the page turning is, can be mesmerizing in its own pleasure. If you're on the go and you want to be able to catch bites of your story without having to leave it alone for very long, taking it on your tablet or your phone like Krebs is probably a good way to go as well. So there's pros and cons. There's benefits to both. As a side note, nostalgia from the past. Do you guys remember those Choose Your Own Adventure books?
Oh, yes.
White cover, red border, had that special font on it, Choose Your Own Adventure. And we would always pick these up at garage sales.
Mm-hmm.
We had, when we were kids, Krebs and I and our sister had quite the library of Choose Your Own Adventure books. And I remember, because I would usually read these in the bathroom, I had toilet paper as bookmarks.
Always.
And so I could go back to my last choice when I would reach the end and choose a different way. So when I read those books, I read every single path that I could in there.
Exhaustive search.
It was quite exhausting. But anyway, the other day I found a Choose Your Own Adventure game.
Mm-hmm.
And I played this with Krebs and our sister, and the box looks just like a Choose Your Own Adventure book cover. The cards inside that are the game are the same font, they're the same format, and when you start reading the pages, which these cards represent, even the cards are slightly yellow tinted to be the same color as mass media paperback books. They kind of discolor pretty quickly, actually. And so all of this was just like, oh my gosh, this feels just like my childhood. And as opposed to a digital book where do you want to go dark mode, light mode? Do you want to go sepia? You can, you change all these things. And so you don't create the kind of memory or mental connection that you would with a physical book. And therefore 10, 20 years from now, when somebody makes something nostalgic over a book that you loved reading on your Kindle, it might not have the same joy attached to it.
It makes me wonder if this is kind of like the issue between, in a very real world a real world example would be Second Life, which was an old video game that a lot of people got addicted to, / Sims, versus a real life experience. In the digital world, there are things you can do that you can't do physically, but the physical world has physical tactile experiences that you can't properly simulate digitally. Kind of like, it makes me think of Ready Player One and the Oasis, right? It makes me wonder if that's kind of what we're talking about here. I mean, even when we talked about binging versus episodic waiting, really the difference between those two experiences was the real life experience of having to be patient, of actually thinking about the material, of simmering and sitting with it and finding value in the depth of thought, which is something that you can't do very well or even at all when you're binging rapidly back to back. And then I also recognize, I thought we would actually have more dichotomy in our conversation here. We fall on different sides depending, but we kind of fell in the same place each time, where it was like each has their use and we're kind of in the middle. But I do wonder if our perspectives are so similar because we're from roughly the same we're from the same generation, right?
Oh, yeah.
We grew up pre-internet and we've lived as adults post-internet, and we straddle that line. Do you think that people who are, say, a younger generation than us, do you think that they would have stronger and different opinions, or do you think that we've just sort of hit on the human experience in general where these tools are concerned and each tool has a use?
No,
Well,
I think definitely there's going to be a generational difference in these answers. Mainly, and I think part of it is that we have touched on nostalgia more than a few times, and when you're a 20-something hipster, you're not old enough to have nostalgia yet.
Well, I mean, I wouldn't go that far. I wouldn't go that far. But for example, my oldest son he's 25, and he's old enough to remember that shows did come out one episode at a time. But that's such a distant memory that the majority of his TV watching is now binge watching. And so I would say for him, he would have a different opinion that no, binge watching is great. It's amazing. The younger we go, they've never known that. They would probably go, no, what are you talking about? That sounds insane. I want to watch all my episodes at once. You're crazy for thinking that was amazing when you had to wait a week before you could watch another show. What were you smoking? For example, like some of my kids, when they were doing reports, and they're just like, oh my gosh, I can't find any material on this topic. And I'm like, just change what you're typing in Google. You'll find something. I can't find anything. Like, you want to talk about not finding anything? Let's talk about when I had to do reports and you had to go to the library and you couldn't take the reference books home.
Here's the card catalog and the Dewey Decimal.
You had to use the card catalog to find a book and hope it had information. And then you had to copy it onto a piece of paper and hope you had enough and everything. It's like, now it's just everywhere. It's easy to get to. And I think that's because that's how their life is now. So they're definitely going to say, wow, you're crazy. Why would you want a book? Just I can read a book on my phone, or I can read a book on my Kindle. Why do you need a physical book? Because even now, some of my kids, they don't have books. It's all on a Chromebook for them. Everything is electronic. They don't even have school books anymore. Yeah. So for them, they're definitely going to be like, why do you need a physical book? I know my kids think I'm crazy for having physical books.
When it comes to textbooks, reference books, things like that, definitely physical is far superior to digital, in my opinion, and I'll tell you why. The ability to quickly flip between pages to find what you're looking for or to do lookups, it takes forever. And even if you've got a big screen, and most of these things are a relatively small amount of information is shown on the screen at a time, swipe is not the same as thumbing through a bunch of pages. It definitely takes longer. The one thing that digital has over physical in that arena is if you know a key word and then your reader has a find function, being able to, but most of the stuff, but in a reference book, you don't normally do that. There's a section you need to go through, a table you need to find, or you have to cross-reference multiple things. So yeah, in those things like, I just finished an Audible book of one of the Stormlight Archive books. And at the end of all of Brandon Sanderson's books, he has an Ars Arcana index that explains everything. And so you've got this narrator who is basically reading dictionary entries. Not cool, although Kate Redding and Michael Kramer do an excellent job of it. But those are the kind of things that I'm going to go to my shelf and pull the book off and actually look through it so it's easier to process or compile the information that way.
That's a good point.
Yeah. All right, folks. So we've covered 2 topics. We wanted to cover more, but we have a lot to say on these 2 topics. So whether you like to binge, watch your TV shows, or whether you like to watch one episode at a time, whether you like reading a physical book or reading on your electronic device, either way is great. We're not here to tell you, oh, you should be doing what we think is best. We're just here to open your mind, discuss the topic, and have fun while doing it. So either way is great. Just do what you do and what you like. So with that said, see you next time.
Remember to let your geek flag fly. So say we all.
Guys, bonus round really fast. Ready? Physical dice or digital dice? Go.
Physical. And whether you like physical dice or digital dice, always remember to be epic and don't suck.
Why would you even ask? Digital dice. That's horrible.
Remember, the Force will be with you, always.